quarterback, episode 67. No fancy intro tonight. We're out here in the shop. Had a lot of people at the Brickyard last week ask me about quarter midget setup, the proper way to do it. And I had to get Hudson's car ready to go practice this week, so I figured it was a good time to do that. So speaking of the Brickyard, great event for us. 7 feature winners and 20 podium finishes. So really proud of all the families that choose to use CSI and the kids that drove awesome races. Was super cool to be a part of that. And we're looking forward to the next national event in Darlington. So we'll jump right into this so we don't waste a bunch of time. Anybody that's tuned in that's not a quarter midget racer, stay tuned in. At the end, we'll answer everybody's question regardless of the car. If you have any questions that have popped up with pit logic or your racing, be more than happy to answer those for you. So I didn't want this to take super long, so I've already squared the car up. And I know some of you will have questions about the squaring procedures, and we can do a video on that in the future. Or potentially you could attend one of our quarter midget chassis setup things. But everything's square and the air pressures are set. So we did that ahead of time. And now we're gonna walk through how I would recommend to scale the car. So the first thing would be to square it, set your air pressures, and then make sure the car is the weight that you're gonna need to race. If you don't have the lead bolted in, I would position it in a neutral position and set your ride heights with that lead in there. And then we'll show you about moving that lead as we move on. So one thing to keep in mind as you're doing a setup on this or any race car you're gonna scale out, you're kind of starting with a big circle and you're just trying to work your way down to the bullseye. So if you set your ride heights and you roll the car on the scale and it's 70% cross and you want 55% cross, then you're going to X all that weight in and your ride heights are going to change. You're going to have to come back and redo your ride heights and just do that procedure a couple times until you make that circle small, small, small and get exactly what you want. So usually it's just a few times, but sometimes things are a bit out of whack. So I'll jump into how I do the ride heights. I like to use this ride height tool and I check just right underneath the frame. It slides in 1/16 of an inch increments. You could also use a regular old square if you don't have that. But I just always start on the same corner and I'll work my way around the car twice. So I'll set this height and work my way around the car, and as I've adjusted other corners, I'll go back and double check each corner to make sure the heights are what I want. So I want this to just slide right underneath the car, and it's a little bit snug. After I make an adjustment, I'll always give the car a bit of a bounce. Okay, so that's exactly what I want. So I like this tool because it's kind of like using a feeler gauge. The car's probably not too far off. We just revalved Hudson's shocks, and the ride height adjusters were left on there. So it's important to check your ride height in the same spot every time. So okay, so I've got all of them set exactly how I wanted. Now I'll just go back and see if any of those adjustments fouled up anything. And since I was only moving it a few clicks, it probably did not. Okay, so the ride heights are set. So the next thing we're going to do is roll it onto the scales and get our weights where we want them. So try to get it right on the center of the scale. I did make sure these scales were zeroed ahead of time. So once it's on the scale, I'm going to give it a push, give it a bounce just to make sure that everything is set. And then get it in the center of the scale pad. And that's 50.5 cross. This is a red rookie car. I wanted just a little bit more than that. So I will go about Xing that in by adding to the left front, or excuse me, the left rear and the right front, and taking out of the right rear and the left front. Again, after I make that adjustment, I'm going to give the car a nice even bounce, compress it there, and then go back and check. So that's 51%, that's what we would want. At this point, we would look at making sure our left side is what we want and our rear is what we want with that, which that's pretty close. If not, we would start moving ballast in the car to get those numbers how we would want. So rear weight, left side weight, you're gonna do by sliding ballast around in the car. Cross weight, you're gonna do by Xing the weight with the ride height adjusters. And we'll roll the car back off, and now double check our ride heights and make sure as we were Xing that weight. Again, I'm going to do a bounce just to make sure that everything's set. And I'll double check that. And since I just had to X a click across, everything should be pretty good. And so yeah, all my ride heights are good. Now, if you had to move 2 turns of cross, X that in, when you roll it back, your ride heights will probably be a little off. So then what we're gonna do, get our ride heights back right, roll it back on the scale, X our numbers. Now this time you might only have to X 2 clicks across in, roll it back, slight ride height adjustment, roll it back on, get your weight where you want. So kind of after my corner weights are right, my ride heights are right, the last thing I would do is check caster and camber. So some people will zero off of the left front arm. I've always just done it with the gauge. So I have a nice Joe's gauge. You just thread it on. Zero it, and we're just under 2.5 negative camber, which is correct. And then for caster, we're gonna zero this out. And do a full right, and that's 3¼ degrees of caster. That's what I want. If it wasn't, we would adjust the top rod on the axle, so top rod only. That's how I recommend to do it. Your left front will kind of lay, however the axle was built. There's only 1 rod on the left side, so you can't really adjust that caster split anyhow. Unless some of the manufacturers have an axle where you could fool with caster split. This style axle doesn't. So we'll do this the same. We're going to just screw this on, zero it out, and see what our camber is. And this is plus 1.5 camber. So for running Red Rookie at Mini Indy, that's what I would recommend. Of course, as I'm doing this, I would be entering it all into Pit Logic on my phone, but we're using my phone for the video, so I'm not doing that. But I would be entering all that in Pit Logic, so I would have a nice detailed setup baseline for when I went to the racetrack. So that's how I would go about setting the car up. Not super difficult to do. Man, after every race, I would put the car back in the racks, make sure everything's square, and redo your setup. These things take a beating lining up for races, and you can knock stuff out of square. So we definitely do it after every race, just to double check everything and make sure everything's right. So at the end of the day, races are won in the shop, and the preparation ahead of time making sure you give your driver the best car possible. So I'll jump on the other side of the camera now and answer all of your questions. I'll set that down. All right, let's see what we had for questions. Looks like a lot of spring in that car. Nope, it's actually, it's got 80-pound springs on the right, 100 in the left front, and a 116 in the left rear. So it's only a 34-pound kid driving it. So I'm sideways. Can you see me correctly now?
You were straight up and down. That's sideways.
That's sideways. This is the correct way. All right. Well, hopefully you can see me good now. What would I set my... Let me see if I can hold this correctly. Sorry. We don't have a fancy setup out here in the shop. So what would I set my cross weight for Mini Indy? Junior Honda, we're usually in that 53 to 55% range for Mini Indy. So that's where we would be for Junior Honda. This is a red rookie, so I'm a little bit less. We're a little less power than that. Eric, what do I feel like is the biggest mistake made on the parking lots? I definitely think it is not staying up with the track. Guys will get going down a road and getting their car tightened up when the track has no grip. And they're tuning for what their car was last time on the track, which could have been a day ago or 12 hours ago. And that track typically changes all throughout the day. And so I think that's the biggest mistake, is just not staying up with the track. And you have to make big adjustments. You know, at Brickyard last week, as the track started to grip up on a main day, you know, solid left side Nerf bars and increasing your left side weight were a big part of that. So Second Shift Motorsports. The Sherman car, they cut the floor pan so it's even with the tube, so you can get your ride height gauge under there. So if you did have a floor pan that went all the way across, you can check it one of two ways. You can either check it by measuring to the bottom of the tubes, front and rear, or you can subtract the 1/8 of an inch or however thick your floor pan is. So the Sherman car is really nice in that aspect, that you're not fighting the floor pan. Steve, Vegas, I'm assuming you're talking about parking lot Vegas, and we would usually go up 1% or 2% for a parking lot race. So thanks, Dave. Thanks for tuning in. It was good to see you at Brickyard. Anybody else have any questions, non-quarter midget people? And if you would like to see a show that is on the setup part, we can schedule that for later. I can have the car all ready and in the blocks, and we can kind of go through the setup. So, high horsepower classes on Sunday, we were right in that 3 to 3 1/8 range. Those classes where you're off the gas a lot and there's a lot of transition from front to rear, you didn't need as much stagger because it would get on the nose and help the car turn. The Honda classes and such, we were more in that 3 3/8 range. Is what seemed to work best for majority of our customers. So, Matt, would I consider putting junk shocks on a non-wing sprint car for transport in the trailer? No. For the most part, I recommend blocking your car when you put it in the trailer. You're going to hurt the torsion bars way more than you're going to hurt the shocks traveling up and down the road. So I definitely would recommend putting blocks under the car to keep your torsion bars where they need to be. Steve, again, locked setup for parking lots. We're going to be in that 3 1/4 range. Is a good starting spot for most parking lots. So Vegas is a pretty round parking lot. So Justin, ratchet on the parking lot tracks. It really just depends. Junior Honda's pretty much, you can always run a ratchet. There was one point during the Brickyard where all the rubber that was on the track actually got really, really slimy and lost a lot of grip. At that point, you probably needed to lock up. But for the most part, I think the faster kids, the more experienced kids, you should be able to run a ratchet in junior Honda like at any point. Senior Honda, I would say the majority did not have a ratchet, but if I was a betting man, I would say the kid that won senior Honda was on a ratchet. He on that long run, he didn't slow down, and he had a really good car, so he might have gambled and went on the ratchet. So, Jamie, I'm not a cut tire guy. I know some people like it. I do think it's personal preference. I kind of have my own tire program that I do with grinding and profiling without a tire lathe. I had a tire lathe for a long time and just never could see a difference and weren't doing it. So, Steve, I'm not sure. I've never been to that Colorado track. I'm going to guess it's a ratchet track. If Corey Boston or Steve Clark or one of those folks is tuned in, they might be able to answer better. Kenny, right side shocks, what pressures you typically run on mid-bank tracks? Typically, if you're running a gas charge shock, we would run 25. Jonathan, I'm assuming you mean unlocked on the left rear. I'm never a totally unlocked guy. We'll either run a ratchet or locked up, but mainly a ratchet for the slower classes. Ron, do I find a lighter spring on the right rear will create more bite? It'll certainly create more roll, and in some instances that will create more bite as long as you have enough spring rate to adequately load the tire. So there's a point there where you go softer on spring, you get more roll, but you don't necessarily get more grip. Junior Animal is kind of 50-50, whether you're locked up or on a ratchet. So there you go, Steve. That's your answer from Steve Clark, who that's his home track out there where the Grands are. Ratchet or unlocked in the junior Honda class for sure. Jamie, CSI shocks on your Beast Midget. Nitrogen. We always recommend nitrogen. It's dry, then you won't have any moisture getting inside the shocks. So, for a medium bank track, Kenny, I would do 15 on the left, 25 on the right. Yep. Anybody else have any questions for Monday Morning Quarterback, episode 67? All right. Well, we certainly appreciate you all tuning in. We hope you have a fantastic week, and we look forward to bringing you more videos next week. Please like and share with your friends, and take care, everybody. Thank you.